I've worked with clients who've had over $1 million in their retirement accounts, but walked away with only $600,000 after taxes. And I've also seen people lose money in investments that they thought were safe. So I'm breaking down the 5 assets that I would sell or restructure before retiring and what you should do instead to live a rich and comfortable retirement. Asset number 1, your 401k or IRA. When I meet with a client who's in their late 40s or older, they have a lot of money in their 401k. Now, when I speak to someone in their late 50s, I hear, I wish I didn't put all of my retirement savings in my 401k. People often regret putting money here for 3 reasons. Number 1, when you pull money from a 401k or IRA, you pay income tax on everything. Number 2, if the market crashes when you're 40 years old, you've got time to recover. But what happens if the market crashes when you're 60 or 65 years old? That can completely destroy your plan because you don't have time to bounce back. And then number 3, if you die and you have a $1 million 401k that goes to your kids, their eyes might light up and first think, wow, mom and dad left me $1 million. But then they'll quickly realize they're not getting $1 million. That full $1 million is going to be taxable income to them. About 40% or $400,000 is going to taxes, and they walk away with $600,000. The problem I see the most is a lack of awareness. I recently met with a client who's a doctor and her husband's an engineer. They're both in their late 50s. They have aggressively saved for retirement in their 401ks over the years, and they've got a balance of about $2.5 million. But she's looking at her situation and saying, I'm going to get killed with taxes. I was always told to put as much money as I can into my 401k for the upfront tax break. The thing is that the more disciplined you are about saving money, the bigger the tax bill often is when you retire. Here's what I would do. If you're younger, diversify. You can look to put some money into accounts other than your 401k. You can spread it across taxable and tax-free assets. Or if you don't want to think about it, just put it into the S&P 500. Look at the history of that. It's always performed. Tax-free assets could be a Roth IRA, could be municipal bonds, could also be whole life insurance set up for cash value. If you're nearing retirement and you already have a lot of money in your 401k, I might look into what's called a Roth conversion. If I could take some of my 401k and IRA money and potentially move some of it into an annuity to reduce my market exposure a little bit or my exposure to risk. Lastly, if you're trying to leave a legacy to your children, here's something that a lot of people we work with like to do. Let's say that you're 60 years or older. You've got a 401k with $1 million, and you really want to pass this to your children and grandchildren. So again, you are 60 years old right now. Let's say you're retired. How do you pass this? Because if you die and it just goes to your kids, they're not getting all of it because they have to pay income tax and everything. What we've done with some is taken some of that money, let's call it $50K per year for 10 years. So we're gradually pulling some money out and moving this into a whole life insurance policy with high cash value. We'll do 2 things with this. First, we'll set up the actual life insurance to be $1 million right out of the gates. It insures your retirement account. So now if you die, $1 million is paid out. How's it paid out with a life insurance policy? It's paid out income tax-free, which is a big difference because now your kids actually get $1 million instead of 40% going out the door to taxes. But the big thing with this is making sure that it's set up for cash value. Meaning by the 10th year, if I've put $500,000 into the policy, that cash value should be more than $500,000. It should be closer to $600K if it's set up right. And then you pay 0 into it, and it will continue to appreciate over time. But what we're doing is shifting some, not all, but some of our 401k money to a safe asset, being a whole life insurance policy. If we follow IRS rules, we can access that cash value. It also grows safely, and then when we die, $1 million is paid income tax-free to our beneficiaries. Asset number 2, indexed universal life insurance. When it comes to retirement, I see IUL marketed nonstop. The reason why is because the product has the potential to generate a lot of income during retirement, and because it's under the umbrella of a life insurance policy, that income can be tax-free if we follow IRS rules. That is a 100% true statement, and it's very possible. This is often why a lot of people purchase the product. Here's how it's usually sold. If you contribute $10,000 per year for the next 30 years, it should average between 6 and 8% over time. You're protected from market downturns, but you still get the upside. And when you're 65 years old, you'll have millions of dollars that is compounded tax-free, and you'll easily be able to pull out $120,000 per year in income, and that's all tax-free. A lot of times people hear that, and that's what gets them attracted to it. Here's the problem with it though. So when you look at an IUL, it is a cash value life insurance policy. It's got a couple components here. One, you have money that you're going to pay in. This will be your premium. So that premium could be a setup where you pay 10 grand per year for 30 years, or it could be a short period of time. But you pay the premium, and at some point, you're going to stop. Then you've got a death benefit. The death benefit is the actual life insurance, and with indexed universal life insurance, you've got two options where it can be level or it can be increasing. That's referred to as option B, where it starts low and goes up over time. That's usually the option to pick if you're looking for cash efficiency. And then you've got the cash value. So the cash value is what everyone is attracted to with this. And how it works with an IUL is that the projections on paper look fantastic. What drives that cash value growth is an index. It's usually the S&P 500. And how IUL works is if the market goes up, you go up with it. And if the market goes down, you don't go down with it. Your principal is protected. A lot of times you'll see a 0% floor. Here's the issue with it. There are things that are outside of our control. Two things in particular. The first is our cost of insurance, or COI. With all universal life insurance policies, what happens with this cost of insurance is each year as we get older, goes up and up. As we age, it really gets expensive over time. So we need the performance of our policy to always outpace the costs. Make sense? Here's the other big thing. The growth will be limited, usually by what is called a cap rate. Now you'll also see terms like participation rate and spread, but the most common is a cap rate. A cap rate is the cap of how much you can earn per year. So for example, if you have a 10% cap rate and the S&P does 30%, your cap, or how much you'll earn for the year, will be 10%. Make sense? A problem that I've seen a lot is those cap rates often start high and then decrease over time, which limit the earning potential that one has on their policy. Another thing is IULs typically have surrender periods. A lot of times they're 10 years, which means if you want to exit the policy during that 10-year period, you can't, not without being dinged with a surrender penalty. Years ago, someone brought us a policy that was sold to a client in 2008. We received the policy in 2020. The client was upset because the policy was not performing. And who brought us the policy was actually the agent who originally sold the policy. And he said, I set this thing up right. I reduced my commission. I really tried to set it up so he would have cash value, but it's like, it's not performing. So the problem was that the original illustration back in 2008 showed a net return of about 9% in the 12th year, which would have been 2020. But here's the really interesting thing. From 2019 to 2020, a year where the S&P produced about a 30% return, his cash value, it was 0.91%. The reason why was because when he started that IUL, the cap rate was 15% and the cost of insurance was low. Cap rate came all the way down to 6% when we looked at it in 2020. It gradually was reduced over the years. And then that cost of insurance kept going up. So his returns were limited. He couldn't control that. That's on the insurance company. And then the cost also continued to increase. This is a problem we see happen a lot. And the problem is that by the time people realize that their policy is not performing, they've already put a ton of money into the product and they've lost a ton of time. So when I look at IULs, they can potentially work, but I haven't seen them actually work. Here's what I would do. First, look at the guaranteed values. Second, ask for historical performance or proof of performance. The thing is, we want to make sure that it works, and if we're getting a policy, we really want to make sure that it is set up in our best interest, being for cash value and not agent commission. Now, with that said, if you already have an IUL and you see that it's not performing, there's some steps I would take first. If you see that the expenses are high, you can reduce those by lowering the amount of life insurance that you have. Now, if you've already reduced the life insurance expenses and you see that your value is growing very, very slowly, that's where I would watch it closely and honestly ask yourself if it is worth keeping. The thing is, if you like cash value life insurance for the tax benefits, I would highly recommend whole life insurance with the 4 major mutuals. And again, the simple reason is proof. Asset number 3, annuities. Personally, I'm a fan of annuities, especially if I'm looking at them for the guaranteed income. However, I would exercise some extreme caution with how much of your portfolio goes into this product. I would also ask yourself, why am I putting money here? Meaning, if you give the insurance company $100,000 today, and they turn around and say, thank you for your money. In exchange, we are going to guarantee you $10,000 per year when you retire. That's easy. You know what everything looks like up front. If you're getting a fixed annuity with a fixed interest rate of 5% for 5 years, great. That type is similar to a CD. You know exactly what you're getting up front. Be aware of the different term. You might start an annuity, let's say it's with $100,000. And after 1 year, your value is $106,000. But then you get your statement and you see this column called surrender value. That's only worth $96,000. The surrender value is what you will actually walk away with if you were to cash that annuity out. Most annuities have surrender periods of 7 to 10 years. And again, what a surrender period is, that if you cash the annuity out, or if you transfer it to a different annuity, whatever that penalty is, the insurance company is going to keep that money. Let's say you start an annuity and you open it with a 401k. You start with $100,000. That's your account value that you see on your statement. The surrender value after the first year is $92,000. That means if you cash it out, $8,000 or 8% goes to the insurance company. Now you will see that the surrender penalties gradually decrease and go away after 7 to 10 years with the majority of annuities. But if you cashed out and you had that $8,000 penalty that went to the insurance company, how did we fund that annuity? Do you remember? It was from an old 401k. So what this means is now that you cashed it out, you still have to pay income tax on the amount that you cashed out. And if you're under the age of 59 and a half, you also have to pay a 10% penalty tax. So it's a double whammy. Both the insurance company charges and also the IRS taxes and penalties. The thing is, if you put a lot of money into an annuity, just be aware of the drawbacks up front. Because if your situation changes, an emergency pops up, or you realize that you just don't want the product anymore, you might feel trapped. So here's what I would do. When you buy an annuity, ask, why am I getting this? Then I would look at the account value, surrender value, and carefully examine the surrender charges along with any other fees that come with the annuity. I would not avoid getting annuities altogether because they do have some very strong benefits, and I use them in my practice personally. I'd look at the guarantees and see if I like the product based on what is guaranteed. That usually helps people make the best decision. Asset number 4, high maintenance real estate. Speaking personally, if I have high maintenance properties, I do not want to carry those through retirement. If the property needs repairs, that costs money. If my tenant can't pay, or I need to find a new one, that costs money. If the taxes go up faster than I projected, that costs money. I get a message from a tenant over the weekend that they've been fighting with their partner and they'd like to see if they can rent if their partner decides to leave. Well, that's awkward and I don't want to deal with that kind of stuff. Or I get a call from the police because the tenants like drama and they're fighting. The thing is, retirement is supposed to be when you finally get to enjoy the fruits of your labor, not fielding midnight calls about frozen pipes or a leaky roof. I would ask yourself, do I really want to do this? Personally, I'd look for other ways to generate income, even if the returns are slightly lower. Here's what I would do. When looking at property, I would honestly evaluate it, and if it looks profitable and has good tenants, then it might be worth keeping. However, if it's been a source of stress and unexpected costs, I might not want it. Now, if I sell the property, I could just put it into an income annuity, and now I get an income stream with zero maintenance or management. Asset number 5, money in the stock market. My dad has always been a big stock market guy. Over the past several years, he's had some really nice returns. One thing I have heard him express multiple times is I don't want to sell any of the stock because then I got to deal with taxes on it. We want to be aware of how much money we have in the market and how that actually can translate to usable income in retirement. Growing the balance is great, but the challenge for some is dealing with this big tax bill when they eventually decide to sell it. What happens is we usually have what's called capital gains tax on the profits. Now, in most cases, I see people hear about this, but reality doesn't hit them until they actually see the bill. This is not a bad thing, meaning having to deal with a capital gains tax, because remember, if you have a capital gains tax, that means you've made some money. So it worked out for you. But part of the deal is that you have to pay taxes on those profits. So when you look at capital gains taxes, they can add up quick, especially if you've just been letting that money compound for decades. The part that can hurt is not doing any planning about how much you sell and when you sell some of your stock. So if you haven't done planning before, what I would do is start by writing things down. For example, if my stock portfolio started with $100,000, that's how much I deposited, and it's grown to $1 million, I want to know the details here. So if I put $100,000 in, that is my initial contribution. On my statement, I'll see it referred to as my cost basis. If it's worth $1 million, that means I've experienced a gain of $900,000. Now you know the 5 assets to sell before retiring, but you still need to build a macro strategy if you want to retire comfortably. That's why in this next video, I'm sharing the 7 lessons you should know before retiring.